Good morning. Hope everybody's having a good day. It's about to get better. Torah always makes our day better. So we are getting closer to Pesach. We find ourselves already almost a week into Nisan, the month that this year is taking us towards Pesach, sometimes very slowly, sometimes very quickly. Either way, we will take the words of Tehillim along with us as we prepare for Pesach. It's amazing how whenever we come together to learn Tehillim, it's incredible how the lesson of the day and the words of the Tehillim that we are learning, it doesn't matter which chapter we're learning, are always so apropos, either personally or globally, and the today's lesson is really no different. We find ourselves on chapter 99, Perek Tzadik Tes. This is the 10th chapter that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. The past chapters we've been studying have all been chapters that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote, Moses wrote, and each one was dedicated to one of the 12 tribes. So chapter 99, our sages tell us, is dedicated to the tribe of Dan. The tribe of Dan, Moshe Rabbeinu compared to a powerful young lion. And B'yamei HaMashiach, in the days of Mashiach, Dan will conquer their enemies, and Hashem will openly rule over the worlds. So this is a continuation of the Psalms that we've been studying, which are related to the Messianic era. It's so important for us to read these Psalms, but not merely to read them, but really to live with the words and to take strength from these words. Very often, we're not really sure what to make of what's going on and how to react to what is going on in the world around us. And these chapters, and especially the Messianic chapters, help us and take us to a place called future. It's important for us to remember this and to live with this, not just to remember this and to live with this. So let's look at this chapter. It begins, Pasuk Aleph, verse number 1, begins with the words, Hashem Malach Yirgazu Amim Yoshev Keruvim Tanut Haaretz. The Lord has reigned, nations will quake before him, who dwells between the cherubim, the earth will falter. Our sages tell us that what this pasuk, what this verse is referring to, and actually Rashi tells us when it says, nations will quake, Yirgazu Amim, nations will quake. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, this deals with the war of Gog and Magog. Then the nations will quake as the matter that is said in Zechariah, and this shall be the plague, etc. Oftentimes, we think of the war of Gog and Magog in terms of a typical war. Rashi over here, quoting from Zechariah, says, and quotes, "And this shall be the plague." There are many things happening in the world around us and have been happening for decades already that are a sign of the times to come, the era of Mashiach. And as we've discussed before in class, oftentimes when we think about Mashiach, we think about Mashiach as an event, something that we are waiting to see unfold. The Rebbe of blessed memory would always talk about Mashiach. And the Rebbe did tell us that Mashiach is here. All we have to do is open our eyes, which, if we would understand exactly what that means, we wouldn't be right where we are right now. So it's for us to try and figure out what that means. One of the possible ways of viewing this is to realize that Mashiach isn't meaning the redemption, the geula, the redemption is not something that we are waiting to watch unfold, but rather something perhaps that we need to notice so that we can become a part of it, live it. So it's important for us as we experience whatever experiences we're having in our life to live with open eyes, meaning what? To recognize Hashem, to recognize God. This is what redemption is. Redemption, the era of redemption, the era of Mashiach is the era of recognition, because there will be an unveiling of God's presence. So we're going to talk more about this in this chapter. So what do we say in this first verse? In this first verse, we say that in that era of Mashiach, what is going to happen? Yoshev Keruvim Tanut Haaretz. Who are the nations going to quake before? Before him who dwells between the cherubim, the keruvim. So, when the Beis HaMikdash was standing, when the Beis HaMikdash was here in this world, anybody who came to the Beis HaMikdash witnessed the presence of God. That was what the Beis HaMikdash's purpose was. The purpose of the temple was to be a place where God's presence, where the Shekhinah was revealed. And when the temple was destroyed, that revelation became hidden. There was no longer the revelation of God. Now, the keruvim, the cherubim, they were on top of the Ark of the Covenant. They were kept in the Holy of Holies, and it was from there, between the keruvim, that Hashem would reveal himself to Moses, to Moshe Rabbeinu. He would speak from between the keruvim. His presence, his Shekhinah, was coming from between the keruvim. So in this verse, where we say, the Lord has reigned, nations will quake before him who dwells between the cherubim, the earth will falter, we are talking about the fact that once again, we're talking about the Messianic era, the time of the revelation of God in this world. And where is it going to emanate from? It is going to emanate from between the keruvim, just as it was before the destruction of the temple. So when Hashem returns his kingship to Zion, then what will happen? The nations will be filled with dread. What is Yoshev HaKeruvim? Yoshev HaKeruvim is the seat of judgment, as is it's described in Yechezkel. So meaning that in the era of Mashiach, judgment is going to come to the world. We spoke about this already in previous chapters, and we're going to speak about it again in this chapter. Pasuk base, verse number 2, Hashem b'tzion gadol, the Lord is great in Zion, v'rom hu al kol ha'amim, and he is high over all the peoples. Okay, so we have two expressions of greatness in this pasuk, in this verse. We have the expression gadol, and we have the expression rom. So gadol is translated as great, rom is translated as high. Let's look at some of the commentaries to understand the difference between these two expressions over here. Gadol and rom, great and high. So when we say, and we've mentioned this already before in the Tehillim, Rom al kol goyim Hashem, God is exalted over all the nations. What is Rom? Rom al kol goyim Hashem, it says God is great, is high over all the nations. And then it says al hashamayim kavodo, his glory is in the heaven. So the expression of Rom is something that is up there, it's yonder, it's high, and it hovers over, but not necessarily is it present over here in a very strong way. God knows what's going on. He sees the world. He created the world, but he remains in the heavens. And that's why it says, Rom al kol goyim Hashem, that God is Rom, he's recognized by the nations of the world, but in a way that he is Rom, he is removed. And that's why many times people may act in a way that is other than godly and perpetrating oppression and evil acts, because yes, they may believe in a creator, but not that the creator is here. Gadol, on the other hand, is something different. Gadol is the verb to grow. Now, something that grows has roots. So if we talk about Hashem in terms of Gadol, so we say Hashem b'tzion Gadol, that the Lord is great in Zion, we're talking about God's greatness right down here and becoming greater and greater and greater, just like a plant that has its roots in the earth and grows taller and taller and taller. Obviously, the stronger the roots are, the stronger is the plant, the stronger is the tree. And this is the expression that we are using over here, Hashem b'tzion gadol, that Hashem's greatness is not removed from this world. On the contrary, b'tzion, it is coming from Zion, it is coming from Zion. When the Geula will take place, when the redemption will take place, that is a time of revelation. Meaning what? Meaning that the nations of the world are going to understand this concept, this idea that Hashem b'tzion gadol, that God is great in Zion. He is right here down in this world, and his light emanates from Zion. You know, it's so interesting. Yesterday, I saw a Facebook post that my husband posted. There was a senator speaking, and the senator was quoting from Tehillim, from the book of Psalms, chapter 121. And he was describing how when the Jewish people would come to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel, and as they approached Yerushalayim, they would say these words, Esa einai el heharim, I lift up my eyes to the mountain, me ayin yavo ezri, where does my help come from? Ezri me'im Hashem oseh shamayim va'aretz, my help comes from Hashem, the creator of the heaven and the earth. And he goes on to quote the rest of the chapter, and quoting from the chapter that we should put our trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We should put our trust in Hashem. And what is he saying? He's saying, this senator who is addressing the government, and saying that as the Jews are coming to the Beis HaMikdash, what are they saying? They're saying our trust has to be in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Our trust has to be in God, not in people. Where is our help going to come from? It's going to come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is so in tune with this chapter that we are learning now. That in the era of Mashiach, what is going to happen? The nations of the world are going to proclaim the Lord is great is in Zion. And the senator goes on to talk, and he says, we're not the ones who are going to do away with this plague. Ezri me'im Hashem, we have to understand that our salvation is going to come from Hashem. And specifically, he quotes the fact that the Lord is great in Zion. That from Ki Mitzion, we say Ki Mitzion Teitzei Torah, the Torah comes out from Zion. Also, the fear of Hashem, Mitzion, will come out from Zion, from Yerushalayim. And then that brings us to Pasuk Gimel, verse number 3. Yodu Shimcha Gadol Venora Kadosh Hu. They will acknowledge your great and awesome name, that it is holy. Yodu Shimcha. Rashi says, what does it mean they will acknowledge your name? Rashi says, they will acknowledge the might of the King who loves judgment. All the nations at that time are going to proclaim God's greatness and God's awesomeness and the holiness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of God. So the Medrash tells us that that in the name of Rabbi Hanina, the Medrash tells us, when is the name of Hashem made great? When is he great? So when he is great is when he brings back the divine presence to Zion. Rabbi Yudin says that this statement, that the greatness of Hashem is going to be when he brings back the divine presence to Zion, to Zion. Because it says, for the Lord has built Zion. Ki bona Hashem Zion. In Tehillim, another chapter, it says that. Now, once the whole world recognizes this, what's going to happen is that everybody is going to recognize the greatness of Hashem, and everybody is going to be in awe of Hashem. And they will recognize the fact that Hashem is present here on this world, and therefore every action is counted, every action is noticed, and every action needs to be accounted for by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by God. This is what has been missing during the era of exile. During the era of exile, we in the world have the choice to choose to recognize God in this world or choose to ignore that fact at certain times. In the era of redemption, which is the era of revelation, God is going to be apparent to everybody, and we will only be able to acknowledge that truth. And what will happen at that time? That's the time where everybody is going to acknowledge Hashem's justice, and justice will be served at that time. So if we look at Pasuk Dalet, verse number 4, Va'oz melech mishpat ohev ata konanta meisharim mishpat utstaka b'Yakov ata asisa.